My name is Louisa Jane Smith, and this is the RE podcast, the podcast for those of you who think RE is boring, which it is, and I'll prove it to you. There we go. My guest today is Laurie Rosenberg, a Jewish educator. We are always interested in lived experiences and how to teach worldviews more authentically, but it seems now, more than ever, that this is essential. So Laurie has agreed to share with us his lived experience, as well as sharing some tips on how to teach Judaism more authentically. So welcome to the RE podcast, Laurie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, good. Just got back from Mallorca, which is interesting, actually, because the Huetas were there who, after 1492, hid their Judaism for generations. And Mallorcan's quite famous for that. And everywhere I go, I seem to find evidence of Jewish identities. I look for a kosher restaurant. There weren't any. That's
there we are. There's
point.
A business opportunity. There's a gap in the market.
100%, yeah. Kosher Mallorca. Yeah, anyway.
So when you're not setting off to Mallorca, what do you actually do? What's your kind of day job?
Okay, so I've been teaching now for nigh on 50 odd years and started in the early 70s. In fact, I started in the Black Country in Wolverhampton, or Willaloo actually. And it was very interesting because there weren't many Jewish people up there. And I actually met and married the other Jewish person at college in Dudley in the Black Country as well. And we've been married now about 52 years on. And I suppose my teaching career started then. And I always remember, the one thing I remember is this boy. I used to walk down the corridor and this kid used to throw money at the wall in front of me. So after about a term and I'd made about a fiver of his money, I asked him, I said, David, why are you doing this? You know, what's got into you? I'm Jewish, are you? He said in his lovely Black Country accent. I said, yes, I'm Jewish. What's that got to do with it? And he just looked at me and says, well, you love money, do you? I said, well, not as much as you, as I've made quite a lot of money out of you this term. I said, what gave you that idea? And he didn't know. He just didn't know. Anyway, I said to him, look, I've got this money. I've given it all to charity. And I keep on thinking of him, actually, again. And, you know, that gave me a kind of an incentive, I suppose, to find out what it is about religion, faith, people's attitudes towards it, and so on and so forth.
Sorry, Laurie, I'm trying to do the maths because the young man in front of me, I don't see how you could have been an educator for that long or married for that long when you're only about 53.
I'm 75.
So you got married when you were about 1. Okay. Well, you need to write a book on how to be good at 75, yeah.
God, you don't know what's going on here.
No. So talk to us a little bit about your work as a Jewish educator. What sort of things have you been involved with over your career?
Okay, so my work as a Jewish... Look, I was an educator, a teacher, and I taught in various settings. Originally, I was a geographer, as it happens, and then I moved into pastoral care, and that's in the early 70s, and that gave me a lifelong interest in emotional intelligence and how children must use their emotional intelligence and most lately their spiritual intelligence. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit later on. But the idea that, you know, my background in teaching is eclectic and varied, and I've taught in various settings. As a Jewish educator, I suppose it's only in the last sort of 20 or 30 years I was an educator. I got involved in pastoral care. I was head of house in a large comprehensive school in the south of England. And then I worked for the Board of Deputies of British Jews for about 12 odd years. And it was there that I really started to get involved in how do young people who are not Jewish understand more about the Judaism that they may encounter in their religious education. And I got involved with a group of other Jewish educators, and we provided the model syllabuses for the SCAA, which was the curriculum authority way back in the mid-90s. Really exciting work. And then I developed Pikuach, which is a framework for the inspection of Jewish schools, which is a faith-based inspection of schools with a religious character. And I was very, you know, I got involved in that, and I actually inspected schools. And when I became a head teacher of a Jewish school, they inspected me, which wasn't quite as fulfilling
with the framework that you decided. So they were judging
with
you
the framework
that you...
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
Well, it's really quite funny, actually, because I was in the classroom and the inspector was in the classroom, a person I knew, and I had a phone call from my wife. So I picked it up and said, this inspector just put her head in her hands and go, oh my God, Laurie, what have you done? I said, hang on, it's the wife. It's all right. The kids knew what I was doing. So, yeah. So my involvement then, I was quite involved with the RE Council as well in the early days and so on and so forth. The Board of Deputies gave me an opportunity also to develop what's actually now re-emerging as a Jewish Way of Life exhibition, the Jewish Life exhibition. And took that around the country. I love doing that, especially the places where there weren't any Jewish people. And most recently, I suppose, I went to New Zealand for 3 years. That was good. Worked in the Jewish school out there and then came back. I was at JCOS, which is the first Jewish pluralist, Jewish comprehensive or secondary school. And I was there for about 12 years. And I loved that experience. It was fabulous to be in a school which had no differentiation between children of different religious denominations within Judaism or none. And that's really important, that we are Jewish. There are different denominations within Judaism. And the fact that some of the denominations don't talk to each other gave me the incentive even more to look at spiritual intelligence. What do the children know about their own spirituality? And then I was a head of a small Jewish school in London. That was really, really fascinating. I loved it working there. Yeah, what happened after that? Oh, I don't know. And then most recently, I've been working. I worked for Hope Not Hate for a while because it's so important for young people to learn about the consequences of hatred, the consequences of mindless discrimination, the consequences of misogyny, and so on and so forth. I love that work. And most recently, I've been involved with the Holocaust Education Trust. That's a kind of broad brush. I'm also a member of Redbridge Sacre and really enjoy doing that work. And Redbridge is one of the most culturally diverse local authorities in London and probably in the UK as well. And the work I'm doing there is very much into bringing children of different faiths together. We share more than we don't. Absolutely fundamental understanding of where faiths and religions and worldviews, we share more. You know, the synagogue, the Gurdwara, the mosque, the church, whatever, it's really good. And my children, my middle children, live in Dubai. And my wife and I go out there. And if you go to Abu Dhabi, which is only a couple of hours by car away from Dubai, you see the Abrahamic house, mosque, church, synagogue on one side. And it's just an eye-opener. In the UAE, Islam is part of their lifestyle. It is not a controlling lifestyle. It is a very giving lifestyle. Yes. So
I mean,
yes,
it's such
Laurie Rosenberg in a nutshell. Sorry.
And it's
you
such
can edit that bit.
I'm leaving that bit in. It's such a rich. Looking back on it, it's so rich. It's full of such beautiful kind of moments, experiences, privileges, and such important work. And you've talked about this importance, I think, particularly right now, of focusing on that idea that there is more than that unites us than divides us. And I think that sometimes, people are not given that impression. And I do want to sort of just talk about then the role of RE and the importance of RE, but just for anyone who's not come across Hope Not Hate, can you just kind of briefly explain what that is?
Okay, well, Hope Not Hate was set up by originally Jerry Gable and Searchlight in the 1960s, I believe, or even perhaps earlier. And it was to combat far-right extremism, EDL, National Front and so on and so forth, that was infiltrating and causing a lot of damage in diverse communities, especially those with a large ethnic minorities, if you can have a large minority, if you get what I mean. When Josephine Cox was sadly murdered on the streets, it then gave them an incentive to really bear down on what was happening in society. Hope, not hate. We need hope, we don't need hate. And therefore, it was a big incentive to go into schools and colleges throughout the whole country, teaching young people about how hatred is a learned experience. Love isn't learned. Love is when you hold your first child. That's love. You don't have to learn to love a child, but hatred has to be learned. And it's a learned behavior. Hope Not Hate goes in and talks about the pyramid of hatred, starting with what's thought to be mindless banter, the banter that leads on to discrimination, and so on and so forth. And it's a pyramid, and each one builds upon the other. And Hope Not Hate is a really important piece of work. It's now looking at misogyny as a huge area as well. What kind of behaviors are boys and young men facing, and what are they learning about their role in relation to women, and this has caused horrible misogyny, and you hear young people talking about it. So Hope Not Hate was really it's still there, it's growing, it's building, and I did that for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed that work. It's a very important piece of work, the influence of the far right, and also now the influence of the far left as well. You've got the two together, the far left and the far right come together within anti-Semitism. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
And I think that I'll put a link to Hope Not Hate in the show notes so people could just go and explore that a little bit more. But I think it kind of leads me quite nicely onto my next question, which is why you feel that it's so important to teach RE generally, but also authentically teach Judaism. So why are those things important today?
The whole concept of RE is to teach children about the different religions that make up the mosaic that is Great Britain. However, nowadays there's a less of an emphasis on organized religion, and this is something that children need to be aware of. So in the main, if you look at the 1944 Education Act and the other education acts that followed, it talks about it. It's constantly talking about in the main Christian. All right. I actually challenged that when I worked at the Board of Deputies. That's another thing about collective worship. But RE had to be in the main Christian whilst talking about the other main faiths. And that's been a mainstay. The main faith in this country is changing dynamically all the time. Numbers are growing in certain areas. The growth of Islam, for example. Judaism is, the number of Jewish people in this country is about 285,000. We're a very small minority, but we are a loud minority, I must say. That's important as well. So young people need to understand the mosaic of faith that's made up their community and the communities within which the children live. So RE, religious education, if well taught, teaches young people to learn from the main faiths, very importantly, and also learning about them. What are the common features? What is the commonalities between the faiths? What scriptures do they use? What practices do they engage in? And it's not just a shop window of watching people doing funny things, maybe funny, wearing funny hats like mine or whatever else. It's about the deep meaningful experiences that make up each of the faiths. And that's why RE is important. RE itself, hasn't been funded, I don't think, as well as it could be. So therefore, it's often taught, how can I put this nicely? It's taught by non-specialists, okay, especially in a primary school. In a secondary school, we do have specialist RE teachers. And one of the ideas I've always had all along is that the secondary RE teacher should be released from their duties to go into their feeder primary schools so that they can actually spread a little bit of their expertise. And that's where the funding of a subject is really, really important at the and the other thing is the local nature of RE as determined by the standing advisory councils for RE SACRE, of which I'm a member. Every SACRE should have a Jewish member and members of the other faiths. So to sum up, RE, religious education, teaching about the main faiths that make up the country. Also, the worldview. What do children understand about the worldview, how faith plays a part in the world itself and how it's made up? And RE also should look at the misappropriation of faith sometimes as well, and RE has an incredibly important part. Look, I wasn't brought up in a Jewish area. I was brought up in Egham. Egham is a small town where they quote the old Little Britain, where the only Jew was in the village, and there was very few of us. But I'll tell you what, I knew all the hymns that we used to sing in school. Right, I used to go into assembly and sing raucously all the hymns. I loved them. I left out the Jesus bit, obviously, being a nice Jewish boy, but I love those hymns. And therefore, this Christian ethic that actually went through my early years in education has stayed with me to a certain extent. And people nowadays downplay it. Oh, we're not a Christian country anymore. But there was something about those hymns that resonated with me. And I'm certain that with a little bit of rethinking there, we could, in fact, introduce our children at a very young age some of the beautiful hymns that do not have a specific faith categorization. All things bright and beautiful, the Lord God made them all. Now that applies to everyone, and I still remember that tune. God, I help in ages past. We used to sing that in synagogue, funny enough, which is really weird. I know I'm going off tangent, but it's really important that the country has lost this kind of ethical foundation to a certain extent that was with the fact that schools had to be in the main Christian. What it should say is that schools have to be in the main mindful of faith, and that would have been a very, very important adjunct to it. Assemblies were great. It was a hymn, a prayer, and a good old telling off. That was all it was, really. I was going to say a hymn, prayer, and a bollocking, actually. And that's the thing that went down. So I used to sit outside in a corridor. There was me, a couple of strange people that had no religion at all, a few Catholics, and my mate Pankaj, the Hindu guy. We used to stand outside. We used to be outside assembly, but we used to go in for the bollocking, for the telling off. And I remember the head teacher walking past and said, Jewish today, are you, Rosenberg? I said, yes, today I am, but I might come in later on.
But I think
Yes,
you've stumbled there, Laurie. I think just something that's really important in our aim. One is that we recognise the heritage of Christianity within this country and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater almost, and that actually recognise the link to our past and our heritage and our identity. But at the same time, the importance of RE, of giving students um, structure or an inspiration for morality and thinking about ethics and thinking about what's right and wrong. And we obviously want RE to be inclusive and diverse and authentic, but that we do have that kind of responsibility to create citizens of the future. And as you've said before, there does seem to be a little bit of extremist views that are almost taking us away from an understanding of what is right and wrong, and actually giving our children the skills to navigate that, I think, is really important.
look, social media has become the new religion. So in other words, that young people now are far more dependent on getting their views, ideas, solutions, and whatever else from the social media, the little phones they hold in their hand. They don't converse with each other as they should. Social media has become a dangerous vehicle for propagating ideas that are counterproductive to a warm and all-embracing society, and that is really dangerous. RE, if properly taught, brings the children and the young people back to understand that there is a common set of ethics and morals that run through all the main faiths, and that commonality is something to learn. And how does each faith express those commonalities in their day-to-day work, in their worship, in their clothing, or whatever else? Those are the same thing. I remember when the Heaton Park outrage was made last year on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. It didn't take long for the local imam to make a public statement in which he said, the murder of one person is if you destroy a universe. And that particular, it goes through all the faiths. They've got every single faith, Sikhism, Muslim, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, has that key element. And young people need to understand that their faith doesn't predominate other faiths either. So therefore, studying RE, first of all, gives the child greater confidence in their own self-belief and greater confidence in the religion that they probably follow in their homes and at the weekend in the synagogues or whatever else. What I worry about is those children who don't have any faith. And this is something if you've got children with no faith whatsoever, then RE might give them an insight into faiths that they can incorporate into their life, into their daily life. And that also is important.
And even
I
just,
hope that all makes
breaking
sense.
down those misconceptions that, you can't have a moral structure unless you're part of a religion. So actually more and more RE is incorporating religious and non-religious worldviews and having a look at organized worldviews that do have a very strong moral ethical code. And actually, again, looking at ethics is what helps you to see that connection between different religious and non-religious worldviews. Exactly as you say about respecting human life and respecting life and treating others the way you want to treat you want to be treated. But also, I think you mentioned social media here. RE also gives students critical thinking skills so they can analyze the
Sure.
messaging they're getting and not just accepting it. Let's focus a little bit just sort of more on Judaism specifically.
But just going back a little bit,
Yeah.
Louisa, just going back a little bit, as part of RE now is humanism. So humanists are very much grounded in a strong set of moral and ethical behaviors that actually can influence the other faiths. Sorry to diversify.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they all gain inspiration from each other. And the more you have like interfaith dialogue and look at those connections, actually all of those
100%.
religious views are enhanced because, I think that you break down those barriers and misconceptions and that leads to sometimes, discrimination and sometimes hatred. Let's think specifically now about Judaism. Why do you feel it's so important that our young people get an authentic diet of Judaism?
Judaism is one of the oldest faiths, and children need to understand there's a chronology of different faiths. Hinduism and Judaism, roughly about the same time, have their genesis, their beginning. Not Genesis, the book.
Yes.
But their beginning, Hinduism and Judaism, and also some of the cultures such as Shintoism in Japan. Okay, also are very old. So therefore, children need to understand there's a chronological development of different faiths, and Judaism is also the wellspring of the other main Abrahamic faiths, Christianity and Islam. So therefore, that gives them that commonality. Good Jewish knowledge and education. Judaism has uniquely universalistic ethics and morals that infiltrate and can teach the children about a whole range of different ideas. And also, Judaism teaches through dialectics, tensions, argument. All right, makes the Jews very fractious and argumentative, and that's another thing. However, teaching children to weigh up different responses to an issue is all part of Judaism, and I think children need to understand that there is a rhythm, and there is a rhythm of Judaism as well. So, if you look at RE syllabuses in the early years, they're looking at food, dress, places of worship, and so on and so forth. At the core of Judaism, of course, is the home, and that is absolutely essential for children to understand what goes on in a Jewish home and a Jewish household. The idea that Judaism itself is a lifelong growing experience. So therefore, it's not just Jews are very restless in their intellectual pursuits as well, and that's also given rise to some quite negative factors as well. So teaching children to learn from and to learn about Judaism is very good. However, what happens in RE is you get a checklist and you go, Judaism, done that, right, next, Islam, okay, done that, got to Hinduism, done that. And at GCSE, of course, you study Christianity and one other faith, and so on and so forth. We have to get away from this checkbox approach to learning about and learning from religion. It's much more than that. A good grasp and a good foundation in the Abrahamic faith and the other main faiths is very important for young people to be able to compare, contrast, learn from, and learn about.
And I think,
Judaism is, sorry.
I was going to say that the worldview's approach to teaching RE moves away from that world religions paradigm where it is like everything's in boxes. And actually, sometimes we've made the mistake as RE teachers of teaching other faiths through the lens of Christianity. That the Torah is the Christian Bible, or the synagogue is the Jewish church.
The funniest one is
and also trying to talk about core beliefs in Judaism, and we focus on God or life after death because they're common to Christianity, when actually that's not necessarily a significant part of Jewish faith and Jewish practices. And I think actually, you're right that we don't want to do this tick box exercise where we do certain things from each of the religions. We want to try and think about what is unique and distinct about that faith and teach it from that perspective.
It's also what Judaism has taught the world, and that's another aspect. Okay, I'm not talking about Jewish supremacy here at all. However, to look at how Judaism itself has affected the world itself in its clear set of moral and ethical standpoint, if you like, from the Ten Commandments onwards, and the Ten Commandments themselves are iterated through all the other faiths, but in a different way. For Judaism, the Ten Commandments stands as the wellspring of the other 603. We don't do things by half,
Yes.
We don't just have 10 commandments. We've got 613 other things. Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right, is that understanding the place of Judaism within the history of the world, and it's, undercurrent, it underpins so much of our understanding of right and wrong and morality and laws and things like that. It's so, so important to understand Judaism in this context.
Sorry, Louise, it's also about numbers, Children, young people, adults, others have very little concept of the sheer paucity of numbers of Jews in the world. In this country, 290,000 Jews. We make a lot of noise, I think, but that number is very, very small. We're a very small population, if you like. We don't go out and convert. That's not what we do. We're not converting religion. So therefore, it's a very safe religion for children and young people to study as well. The old idea, the numbers of chronology of what happens in history, put Judaism in terms of history. It was here 6,000 years ago. It's still here. Very little about the core foundation of Judaism has actually changed during those times. Yet, of course, Judaism uses technology and advances itself without compromising the original laws upon which it's based. That's really important for children to understand, because that can help them in their daily life. One of the things I used to teach about with kids is how Jews think. All right, probably this podcast are probably burying their head in their hands and thinking, my God, but how do you think? So what I used to do with them is say, okay, take a school rule. So they go, do not run in the corridor. They always come up with that one. Then I get them to put that on a piece of paper in the middle of a piece of paper. And in groups around the outside of that piece of paper, they would go, what is running? Can you run? Supposing there's a fire, what happens if there's a fire? Supposing a child can't run, is he going to feel this? And you build up around this thing, this whole page. This is the Talmud. This is how we learn. This is what we do. And I think that's a great exercise, giving an insight into the way Jewish people think and into the way that the Jewish religion itself is based on laws that change according to specific behaviors at a given time. But you never lose the basis of the law that's made. So if you don't run the corridor, that still stays the same, but the way in which it's interpreted may change.
Yes, might be different.
A little nugget really for you teachers out there.
There we are, listeners. Something you mentioned earlier, and I would definitely want to come back to this, is this idea of spiritual intelligence. So you mentioned it earlier. What do you mean by that? What does it look like in a classroom, and why is it important?
Giving young people, look, spirituality is a very, very difficult concept to get hold of. It's nebulous. It's very, very slippery. It's very, very difficult to pin down. However, to give the young people the idea that there is something beyond themselves, there is something beyond the materialistic world within which they are, which sometimes they're trapped, is something beyond. And that's it. The notion that not everything is based on what is happening in front of them, but there is something else. And the notion of spirituality is summed up with three key coordinates: imagination, creativity, and curiosity. And I reckon that you can audit a whole curriculum of a school through those three coordinates. I've got other ideas as well on that in a minute, based on the Shema, which is our basic prayer. So if you think about, if you audited a piece of, a piece of curriculum, how much time are we giving to stimulate the children's imagination? Your imagination is your key to your spiritual intelligence. Your curiosity, what is going on out there? How can I find out more? And your creativity, Creativity is the ability to make something out of nothing, which is basically what we believe God did. So those three elements is the key to your spiritual intelligence, your SQ. And I think I think it's just been ignored. We have a national curriculum that in many ways sticks subjects in different silos. The silos don't talk to one another. We're not teaching our kids to problem solve using the subjects in a creative way. And spirituality actually goes above the silos of knowledge. The national curriculum, I think, has asphyxiated a lot of our children's curiosity and imagination and creativity. So if you want to have spiritual intelligence, you've got to get that right. It doesn't mean that you have to believe in God. I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about belief in something else beyond ourselves. And when I go into schools and I talk to kids about spirituality, and I said, have you ever looked at something and thought, my God, that's really taken my breath away? Or awe and wonder, these things about awe and wonder, belief in something else. I think all those are your SQ. And I'm sure you can audit a school's curriculum to look at. And the other Q is EQ, your emotional intelligence. And the two are very much put together. So one of the core prayers in Judaism is the Shema. Listen. It's very, very important to listen. Sometimes you don't hear anything, which is wonderful. So it says, listen, Jewish people, stop talking already. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, listen, Israel, or Jewish people, the world. The Lord of God, the Lord is one. And then it goes on to say how you should love God. It says you love God through your heart, your soul, and your resources. Your heart. Your heart is your emotional intelligence. Your soul is your spiritual intelligence, and your resources are your cognitive skills and abilities. All right. And I've been pushing this idea then in Jewish schools, and I was listening to me, mind you, but never mind, that we, again, an audit approach. How much of your curriculum is through emotional intelligence? How much of it is through empathy, understanding, love, whatever? We don't spend enough time on it. And that's something that Judaism can teach the world. And it's also in other faiths. It's not just, we don't have a monopoly on those three intelligences whatsoever. However, if those three intelligences were used more, can I say, intelligently, we would have a much better society and a much better RE world, because RE then could be construed through those three elements.
I'm honestly just sort of slightly taken aback by the power of that word listen at the beginning, the Shema, it's like the word that's almost rushed over to get to the good bit, isn't it? But actually, particularly in the world that we're living in today, the importance of just listen, because we're very quick to respond,
Absolutely.
to react, to jump in, aren't we?
No, the other thing is much more prosaic than that. I see people walking through, I live in an area of East London. It's green, it's a lot of forest, there's forested areas where I live, and people are walking through and they've got 30 great big headphones on.
Yeah.
I think to yourself, I said, what you're listening to?
Yes.
Don't you want to listen to the wind through the boughs of the trees, the birds twittering, people's snippets of conversation?
Yeah.
And when I walk around, I never wear my headphones. I won't do it. And I'm always talking to people. Hello there, good day. And they look away and go, well, oh God, it's that nutter again. But listen, Shema, listen. And we don't do enough listening. We hear things, but we don't do enough listening.
Yeah.
And it worries me that we're going to, on a more stranger note, we're going to have a generation of tinnitus people because they've all got their headphones on. It's going to give them terrible tinnitus in the next generation.
Yeah.
But people don't listen. People don't listen to
no.
each other. They don't listen to things. I hope they listen to this podcast, mind you.
They will. They absolutely will.
Wait, out there, listen. Shema.
I'm really interested, Laurie, in kind of you as a person and you as a Jewish person, your Jewish identity, because I think when we're teaching RE, it's so nice to have authentic lived experiences to enhance our teaching. So talk to us about your Jewish identity. What does it mean to you? How does it influence your life?
It guides my life, but doesn't control it. I had a big argument not an argument, a discussion with the rabbi of my local synagogue. I love my synagogue, and we always have these disputations, arguments. And I was asking him, I said, whether Judaism controls or guides. And it was really important, actually, because there are so many rules and regulations. If you go through rules and regulations, it does give you, he said, no, it's a framework. I thought, yeah, that's it. That's quite interesting. So Judaism gives you a framework for your daily life, a framework in terms of what you can eat, how you should conduct your life, and also a framework for the rhythm of the week and the rhythm of the month and the rhythm of the year. And together, those are very, very important. It also gives you a framework. I lost my mum 2 years ago, and she was 103, bless her. Baruch Hashem, bless her. 103, yeah.
I'm sorry for
And
your loss, but I'm also amazed by that. What a woman.
yeah, she was. And I lost my brother also about 2021. So that was 5 years ago. Uh, He was younger than me, had MND. That was a horrible, horrible ending. However, in both cases, for my mum and my wife, my mother-in-law also died 2 years ago. When we came to the funeral, I said that Judaism has a framework. We didn't worry about anything. It was all done, buried within 24 hours. I know that sounds a bit bizarre. 7 days sitting down in our homes, called a sitting shiva, from the Hebrew word shiva, meaning 7. A month of less onerous funereal duties, and then a year. I didn't have to think about, what song are we going to sing at the funeral? What are we going to do? What's going to happen? So that's your framework. It's a guide. I found sitting with my family when my brother died and when my mum died and mother-in-law was inspirational. There was something about that gathering together to talk to each other. And there was a lot of laughs. There was a lot of going back, the old anecdotes, the stories and everything else. And then, of course, you have the support of the community when you go through this. It's really important. So Judaism gives you a framework for your daily life, for your weekly life. For example, the central part of our week is Shabbat. Shabbat means to stop. And you stop. You become I love this thing. I talk about to kids about it. You become a creature, not a creator. And that element of rest, become a creature. Don't be a creator. Don't be physically creative. Put your phone away. I'm terrible at that. Absolutely awful at putting my phone away. And I try very hard. I'm not a very good Jew at all, but I try. So what happens, during the week, you look forward to Friday night. Yes, who's coming for dinner? What are we going to do? And the Friday nights, my children live in Dubai. I've got 3 children and 4 grandchildren. It's lovely when we all get together when they can do. And Friday night is very traditional food, and so on and so forth. And if you're an RE teacher, you can look at Friday nights in different communities. We're diverse, The Jewish people are not just one. We're a diverse group of people. Part of my work with the Holocaust Education Trust is looking at the diversity of the Jewish community. Jews from Greece, Jews from Baghdad, like my father-in-law was, and so on and so forth. And each of those communities keep Shabbat in their own way on the Friday night, and chicken soup is universal. It might
Yes.
be different. For example,
Yes.
my sister-in-law, I lost my brother, as I said, his wife came from, her family is Salonican, right? And they have what's called egg and lemon chicken soup, right? And even in the Baghdadi community have a chicken soup, very important. Very, very important. And then you've got the rhythm of the year and the festivals of the year. So already we're working towards the Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, and everything else. And it's a framework. Doesn't control, but it guides.
It's
And
really
that's me. I'm
helpful.
not particularly. Look, I'm a member of an Orthodox synagogue. Am I Orthodox? No, I'm observant though. So my observance is my own observance. Okay, that's me. That's what I do. No one tells me how I should be or whatever else. And there are you walk, if you go to areas of East London, you'll see Jewish people with the hats and the ringlets and so on and so forth, and the women are dressed differently. We're diverse. Okay. And we have synagogues in the Reform community with gay people and so on and so forth. We haven't got gay marriages yet, I don't think. Maybe in the liberal synagogues. Yeah.
Really want people
I
to
don't know
listen
if that,
to
I
this.
don't know if that gives you an insight.
It really does. And actually, what's
What?
so lovely listening to you is that my last episode was with Anna Silva from the Board of Deputies, who I'm
Yeah, I know,
sure
Anna.
you know Anna. And my
Of
next
course.
episode is with a Jewish couple, and he's from an Orthodox background and she's a convert to Reform Judaism, and they got married. And
Okay.
so actually what you're saying links so nicely to that in terms of diversity of expression, but there's these core things that kind of unite you. But what you put in your chicken soup and how what kind of matzah you have, the expressions of those kind of core beliefs are very, very slightly different.
Yeah, the Seder night. I was talking about this with my wife a couple of days ago about the Seder nights that we've had. These are the first 2 evenings of Passover. We get together, and it's a psychodrama. We have a script. We have props. We have
Uh-huh.
and in my house we have the songs that have been for generations actually of different singing and so on and so forth. And we all look forward to the meal. But you're right. We do have big arguments about matzahs, about the
Yeah.
unleavened bread. Rekuzas,
Yeah.
rekuzas,
Yeah.
manischewitz. We had manischewitz this year. They were very nice, actually.
Yeah.
So we argue. And some people
Yeah.
say the box tastes better than the matzahs, but let's not go there.
They are quite dry. But actually what's so lovely is that you have got this framework and you have got this community. And I think that this is what I think this is almost like the USP of any faith group, is to create that framework, that structure, that sense of something greater than yourself, which I think is such an important thing to do, to find space in your life for things that are greater than yourself. It's so good for your mental health. Can I ask you what it's like to be Jewish in modern Britain? If we look at statistics, we can see that Islamophobia, anti-Semitism are on the rise. And of the two religious groups, they're the ones most likely to be sort of treated negatively because of their faith. What is it like for you being Jewish in Britain in 2026?
I have to go to shul, to my synagogue. I have to go through metal gates. There's a guy at the door with a stab vest on. Then I have to go through other doors. It's an absurdity in the 21st century. That is a total absurdity, and it really annoys me. I was going to say something very rude there, but it really does
No,
annoy me
we hear you.
that we have to do this. All right,
Yeah.
and it is awful. Also, I taught in a Jewish school, and the Jewish school also, you can't get it. What's going on? What's happening here? What's driving this virus of anti-Semitism? And it is a virus, but it keeps mutating. It's over 2,000-year-old virus. It's a mutating virus. It's also become a bit of a fashion tool lately. It's almost fashionable to be anti-Semitic, and you're using Israel and Gaza and Palestine as the tool to approbate your anti-Semitism, and that is vile. Okay, so I teach about the Holocaust. What happened in the Holocaust was not something that suddenly occurred. It was the virus of anti-Semitism that took a turn in the 1930s when it was specifically Germany was suffering, and they wanted to blame someone, so they blamed the Jews. The Jews seem to get on all right. Why do we get on all right? Because we value family and education. Simple, straightforward. Okay. The blood libel, which was something you got the blood libel Lincoln. You have the Jews in York, 1190, who were murdered, who refused, burnt alive. 1290, the Jews were thrown out of Britain. 1492, out of Spain and Portugal. And it goes on and on and on. And we're suffering it again. And it seems to be using Israel as the evil amongst us. And that also is absolutely a total absurdity. They call you a Zionist as though it's some kind of awful thing. Zion, we say in the synagogue every day, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah davadno Yerushalayim. The word of the Lord shall come out of Zion, and the word of the Lord shall come out of Jerusalem. That's been in our liturgy for 3,000 to 4,000 years. So it's not something new. The geopolitics of the Middle East has created a sense of fear for the Jewish communities. And it's really, really worrying. I do not, for myself, I love Israel. I've been to Israel. I'd love to live there one day, I suppose, as many other Jews. However, just because I love Israel doesn't mean I applaud every time something terrible happens in Gaza. I don't. It worries me. It upsets me. It incenses me that Israel seems to have lost its lost its humanity to a certain extent through its geopolitics. But I don't want to get blamed for it. It's not my fault. It's not my fault, and it's also Islam has now, some Muslims have used the situation in Israel to propagate a sense of hatred for Jews, which is absurd. We're brothers, we're cousins,
And
as I
actually,
said before.
most Muslims that you will speak to will also criticize the actions of some Muslims that
100%.
have used that,
Abs-
and so what I have seen is these representatives of these religions doing things in the name of their religion that is rejected by most adherents to that religion, but they're getting conflated. And so that nuance is lost. So, the fact that you can be.
it's become trendy to be anti-Semitic or to be anti-Zionist, okay? And unfortunately, the young people, and it's mainly young people in the 20s to 40, 20s to 35, I think, are caught up in this. And it's a generational thing. The older generation are wringing their hands, saying, "What can we do? This is appalling. This is wrong." And it's bled out into the Nowak thing and the Sikh, the thing that's happened. That person who murdered that white guy has the Sikh community have come out and said, "What's he done in our name?" It's in our name. And I think that's something for them to think of. What are you doing in the name of Islam, in the name of Judaism, in the name of Hinduism, in the name of Sikhism? What are you doing? Why are you perverting? Why, when I'm in Dubai, Islam is a peaceful, and I'm in the Dubai Mall. Other malls are available, so I'm with my grandchildren. Always buying things for them, and you hear the call for prayer. There's this wonderful moment of everything stops buzzing. There's a moment of quiet. The call for prayer is over. People scurrying off to and there are little mosques everywhere in the mall, and then it returns back to normal. And I wrote about this because it had such a deep impact on me. That is Islam. That is what Islam means.
Yeah.
Islam and Judaism, Christianity share this common sense of goodness, all right? Goodness and godliness. That's what God is, good and God. This sense of godliness and goodliness. And when this is perverted for, I don't know, it's a perversion, people blame Islam. It's not Islam, it's the people, it's the young people there who are using and perverting their faith in order to propagate their hatred and whatever else. It's become trendy. My father, of blessed memory, was in the Canadian Air Force, yet in Toronto, where he was born, there have been attacks on Jewish schools, on synagogues and Jewish shops. It's just appalling. And I don't know. Does it worry me? I'm a fairly sort of glass half full sort of bloke,
Yeah.
so I just get on with my life. I have a lot of my friends are made up of different faiths, and over the road I have a lovely, lovely person who is a Muslim lady, and she's beating me up through personal training. She's just the most wonderful, wonderful person in the whole world. And we sit there, we share so much. She says, "Oh, we do that. You do that. Well,
Yeah.
we've done that. You get
Yeah.
together, you have Eid. What do you do? Oh, we argue." So we have all our friends round for Eid,
Yeah.
have a big meal, and then I said, do you have a Muslim goodbye? And she goes, "What do you mean by that?" She said, "Of course we do. The Jewish goodbye. People come round to our house, they have dinner, and then the goodbye takes ages. I've heard from the kitchen to the lounge to the hall. An hour later, we're saying goodbye. Anyway,
But
totally
actually,
irrelevant to this conversation.
But no, because it's showing that connection between, and the connection between different faiths. That Islam and Judaism are not these disconnected faiths that share no common ground. That there's so much
Yeah,
overlap and commonality and common experiences. But I think this comes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of this importance of good RE, so that children can look at these situations that are happening on a geopolitical scale and go, that's not Judaism, that's not Islam, that's not Sikhi. That is the
100%.
action of a
100%.
person.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And to learn what it is, if you think about leadership in each of the faiths, if you think about how an imam visiting a school can actually make such an incredible difference to
Yeah,
the people's outlook on
yeah,
Islam,
yeah, yeah,
including the Islamic kids themselves. A rabbi visiting a school, Laurie
yeah,
Rosenberg visiting a school, these are available. And so on. No, I don't do a
yes,
lot of that. Uh,
yeah.
but my latest work, I think we're going to come on to that with Holocaust Education
Yeah,
Trust,
let's move on to that.
is a vital element We live, I teach, I work with the Holocaust Education Trust, and I go to schools and we present the story of a survivor in their own words using technologies, not artificial intelligence. For crying, it's not artificial intelligence. What has happened is that survivors were asked questions over a 2-week period, and algorithms allow young people to talk to the survivor. What were your experiences during the Holocaust? What do you remember about Kristallnacht? What happened to your brother? Blah, blah, blah. So, using the testimony of a survivor, it's called Testimony 360, and also virtual reality, we can take young people to where the survivors grew up, to see their homes, their houses, their synagogues, what's left. And the work with the Holocaust Education Trust is far-reaching. They have, apart from Testimony 360, there's the Auschwitz experience, teacher training, and a whole raft of activities. And what do? They enable young people to learn from the perspective of when society goes wrong, when it's poisoned, when it's perverted, and what happens. We look at numbers. We don't actually dwell on them, but 6 million is a huge number. How can you understand that? And Holocaust Education Trust is not there to shock. However, it is there to educate through telling them what happens when humanity fails, when absolute morals and values disappear under the most dire circumstances. And the other thing it teaches you is that it could happen here. It could happen anywhere.
Yeah.
So the Holocaust Education Trust, I'm proud to be working with them. And the other thing I've been working with, I don't know, it's available on ITVX. It's a film animation, Survivor. I would ask you to look at that. Survivor is an animated story of a survivor, Ivor Pearl, who is the most wonderful human being and my friend. And the animator is Zoom Rockman, who is what he's done is he's made Ivor's story into an animation with music and whatever else. Every single aspect of that animation is taken from deep research. It's not just a cartoon that's made up. I would urge everyone to look at that, and hopefully I'm working on some resources to go with it. Unfortunately, Holocaust education is not something that we look back on, but in fact something that will teach us about what happens when everything goes wrong. And I'm afraid that the iron bars and the gates of our synagogues and about the people in stab vests outside and the outrages that have happened, Bondi Beach and so on and so forth, I'm sorry, it's always there, and it only needs to wake up occasionally. And it's up to young people, and all young people and their teachers and their parents and the families to actually work together to ensure that it never happens again. And that's what it is. The young people need to have the knowledge that what they are doing is evil. Do they know the difference between right and wrong? I don't know. Is it, when my little grandson comes over from where he is in Dubai, goes, Papa, look, all this graffiti, that's disgusting. If you did that in Dubai, you'd be really punished. And he gets upset. So have we lost our moral compass over here? Have we lost this sense of, grounding our behavior in a set of rules and situations that teach you to be a better person? And that's what happens when in faith.
I think there's so much you've said that's so rich. I think, first of all, I just mentioned that I will put a link to the Holocaust Education Trust and to the Survivor film on the show notes so people can look at that. The Survivor thing is a new thing for me, so that's something I'm going to go away and read. I think, just as you're saying, it's something that's become very apparent to me. I think when I've taught about the Holocaust, or whether I've studied it at at GCSE, history, all that kind of stuff, I've always felt slightly removed. It almost feels unreal that would really happen, and we can't really understand how it would happen. Teaching it right now in the current climate, it's starting to make more sense to me of how this can happen, that you can very slowly chip away, create the foundations for hate to be normalized and for people to feel so angry that then when something like the Holocaust happens, we don't feel repulsed by it, because we've been manipulated to think that this is the only solution to a problem. And do find it completely terrifying. And I think this is absolutely why we need to have really good, authentic teaching about Judaism, but also allow our students to explore the concept of morality and right and wrong. And I think in the past, what we've done is we've told them what's right and wrong. What we actually need to do is to teach them how they can decide what is right and wrong so they can navigate that. Because, there are people that genuinely think what they're doing is right when other people are looking at it going, how can you discriminate? How can you hate these people? I don't know. I think that if we tell them what is right or wrong, there's going to be conflict. If we tell them how to decide, I think actually that can equip them to navigate what's going on.
You see, I lived through, my teaching, I started teaching in 1973 or 73. And it was then the great era of values clarification, where children make up their own mind over what is right and wrong. Not, as you said, Louisa, which is choosing values and a moral guidance that you get from the main faiths and none and a worldview. Right? It's not values clarification, because in values clarification, any decision they make is the correct one. That's not right. That's
Yeah.
not on.
Yes.
That's not
Yes.
not there. One of the things I'm aiming to do, and maybe I shouldn't talk about this. Blimey, I will do, is to bring together young people and actually get them to make a series of pledges. I pledge to, I pledge never to. And for them, the idea was to bring together young people in the year 12, actually, before their lower sixth in old language, in old money, because it's their year before A levels. And I was going to bring together young people, groups of them from different schools in an area, put them in tables, and then give them some scenarios. And they said, right, come up with some pledges. You only need 3 or 4 on your table, and then write those into a kind of covenant that they could cascade back to their school. That's what I pledge never to make an anti-Semitic comment. I pledge never to make a misogynist thing. I pledge never to carry a knife. I pledge to ensure that my parents are well looked after in their old age. They're simplistic stuff, and that's the kind of thing, Louisa, I think you were iterating there.
Also, I
We
think what you've said there is really interesting, is that, morality is not as relative as we think. We can't give that impression to students that whatever you think is okay. We have to give them the tools on how to think. We can't just say whatever you think is all right, you go ahead and do whatever you feel is right. We accept everything. That's kind of dangerous. We have to give them the tools to decide. So if we're
100%.
saying to them, make a pledge, we have got to equip them to know what to choose in that pledge. What would be the consequence if you said this or didn't do this or did this? What influence, what impact would that have on the world? And I think this is where, this sort of ethical literacy or, moral literacy is really important, because they need to know how to do it
100%.
rather than live it to themselves. Just as we close, Ori, because I think it's been such an incredible conversation, if there was kind of maybe 3 tips that you could leave us with in terms of how to authentically teach Judaism, what would those 3 tips be?
Make sure that you have someone who can come in and talk to the young people about their life experiences as a Jewish person.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter from which denomination. Secondly, ensure that whatever they're teaching from, what resources they're using, are resources that are given an authentication, if you like, especially with Anna Silva from the Board of Deputies of British Jews. And thirdly, give them, I suppose, this is a really difficult one to think of the 3, to get them to understand the world from a Jewish perspective, not through the prism of the Holocaust. It is not that's one set. Don't teach Judaism through the prism of the Holocaust or baseless hatred or anti-Semitism and so on. Teach Judaism through the prism of a living, vibrant, open faith that has a strong set of moral values and has made incredible contributions to the world. And I don't shy away from that. 20% of Nobel Prize winners have been Jewish, yet we only make up 0.2% of the world's population. Why is that? What's happening? What's going on? What's been the Jewish, and they could look at Jewish humor as well.
Yes.
which is something particular to the Jewish people. Mel
Yeah.
Brooks, my favorite. Someone said
Yes.
to him, say, he is in an interview, it says, Mr. Brooks, what's your secret of your age now? You're in your 90s, aren't you? He goes, yeah, don't die. That's brilliant.
So good. I love Phil Rosenthal, who does. I think he was a comedy writer in America, and he now does a program called Somebody Feed Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he is
Is that
just, and
the
the
food
food guy.
program?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it.
And he
Absolutely.
has
He's
unfortunately his
always
father,
talking to his mum.
his mum and
He's
dad,
always
he
talking
used
to
to
his
like Zoom them.
parents.
Unfortunately, his
I
dad's
know.
passed away now, but his dad had this very, very, very inappropriate Jewish humor. Would just tell the most
Well,
raucous
that's me.
jokes at the end of each episode, and it's just completely and utter
Yeah,
glorious.
yeah. My wife keeps telling me I'm inappropriate in most of my behaviour.
I
I've loved
think that's
talking to you, Louisa.
oh,
It's
it's
been
lovely
lovely.
talking to you. Laurie, just as we close, if you could wake up tomorrow and one thing was different about the world, what would you like it to be?
That's a really difficult question, isn't it? I suppose all the twee things, removal of racism, removal of fascism, equality, egalitarianism. I suppose I'd like everyone to have a real understanding of their spiritual and emotional intelligences and how they can use it for the betterment of the world. You can't have a broad brush, but giving your people, everyone, an understanding of what they say has an impact, what they think has an impact, what they do has an impact. And if everyone could use their emotional, and we're all born with it, we all have it, their emotional, spiritual intelligence, then we would have a much better, fairer, more equitable world and an end of baseless hatred. I'd also get rid of headphones.
I feel kind of bad now because I'm wearing headphones.
That's all right. Well, you got to,
I was
haven't
doing
you? I got
headphones
these
so
in
I
my
can hear you.
yeah, I got these in my ear. Horrible things. Nah, it's just hear the birds singing. That's it.
Yeah. I
I'll
think,
bring back steam trains. I love steam.
yeah. I mean, they're terrible for the environment, but they sound lovely.
Awful.
I mean, this chat has been like, it's moved beautifully from the kind of frivolous to the profound, which I think every good conversation should. So I really, really appreciate your time, Laurie, and for giving us such an authentic insight into how we can teach Judaism better.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I've loved talking to you, Louisa. You have a really great way of getting out of me things that I shouldn't say. And that's people. No, you're very, very Louisa. I do this pause for thought stuff, and it's tough when you have to encapsulate your thinking in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
draw it out of me. I'm very. I feel very privileged to have taken part in this podcast. So thank you so much.
Laurie, that's put a tear to my
Am
eye.
I?
Thank
Am
you
I?
so
You're not
much.
recording, are you? Is
I
this? Is
am.
this? Oh my God! Right. Okay. That's fine.
We can
Never
decide
say,
whether it goes out or
never
not.
say anything. Never say. I was taught this years ago. I had my own program in Brighton called Shalom Radio, and I was taught by my producers that never say anything when you've got a microphone in front of you that's inappropriate.
Just silence. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. And I think,
Okay.
yeah, but
Lovely.
no, this has been so wonderful and I can't wait. And actually it's kind of going out, I think it'll be at the end of Jewish Culture Month. So I think it will go out on the 15th,
Oh,
which
good.
is the end of Culture
All
Month.
right.
But yeah, but it's still lovely to celebrate diversity and the richness and the sort of like the heritage of Jewishness in this country. So I really appreciate it. My name is Louisa Jane Smith, and this has been the RE podcast, the podcast for those of you who think RE is boring, but it's not. It teaches spiritual intelligence, which is part of the way that we can make the world a better place. But thank you so much for listening to us bore the life out of you.